What is up, everybody? Welcome to Pub Sports Radio. This is the DFS Picks and Prediction Show. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday where me, Luke, AJ, Weezy will not be here today. We have Tajik replacing him. We're going to be breaking down the card from a DFS standpoint, also giving our picks along the way. As always, we're going to go through our fight to target, our fight to fade, our fighter to fade, favorite dog, favorite GPP play, favorite cash play, favorite value play, and favorite dart throw. Then towards the end, we'll see who won the DK contest last week and then give our new lineups for this week and see who wins this week as well. So kick it off to Luke. Luke, what is up? Are you looking forward to this card?
Yeah, it should be a fun one. We kind of just touched on it off the top before we jumped on live, had a fight fall out. So down to 10 fights on the slate. Always these smaller slates, but definitely make it interesting from a DraftKings perspective in terms of construction. But a lot of fun fights. I think half the card is projected to end ITD, so we should see some finishes too.
Yeah, it should be an interesting card. Not the best one, especially now that we have 10 fights. But AJ, are you looking forward to this card?
Yeah, especially because I would implore the DraftKings players to not get discouraged when we have fewer fights on a card, because we saw not too long ago in UFC Fight Night, Brunson versus Till, there was very few fights on that card, yet somebody won first prize solo in the big GPP. And as Luke touched on, a lot of fights that could end inside the distance. I could see the potential as well. I think there's a lot of angles that we could attack here in terms of lower owned plays with big upside. So yeah, this will be a fun slate to break down.
Yeah, that's a good point. For me personally, it seems like I have the most success the lesser fights there are, as weird as that is. So yeah, I don't hate there being only 10 fights and maybe even less depending on how the weigh-ins go and all that good stuff. And then Tajik filling in on short notice for Weezy at about 3 hours notice. Thank you for coming on, Tajik. What is up with you?
Not much. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be on the show. Yeah, this is the card of the year for me. I joke. I'm happy to break it down. It's a 10-fight slate. It's going to be exciting for the drafting purposes. So happy to make my input to the show.
Yeah, appreciate you coming on. We have PayPal in the chat saying, thank God I don't have to break down another Pickett fight. Good riddance. Yeah, I'm with you there. So I say we get into it before we start. If you guys can all leave a like on the video, subscribe here to Pub Sports Radio. That'd be much, much appreciated. We will start with always as our fight to target. And let's start with Luke. Luke, what is your fight to target for this fight card?
Yeah, I'm going with the main with Dern and Rodriguez. The fight is the second best ITD line in the whole card, roughly around a 68% implied probability to finish. I don't know if it's necessarily a unique opinion, but I think the fight in general is pretty binary. Obviously, Dern's main path, land takedowns, get top time, potentially find a sub. I know that Rodriguez hasn't been sub before, but I feel like if there is a girl to do it and make her pay for kind of some of her defensive inefficiencies or get up game per se, it's probably Dern. Conversely, if she's not able to get takedowns, she probably gets butchered on the feet by Rodriguez. We got 25 minutes to work with as well. Touched on right off the top that, 5 fights on the slate, half the slate is projected to end inside the distance, with both girls kind of sitting around that 8.2, 8K range. I feel like there's more merit to being able to fit both of them into your constructions. And I think either one finds their way to the optimal in terms of how they win the fight. So I like this one to target.
Yep, I'm going to completely agree with you. That is mine as well. Like you mentioned, good inside the distance line. And like you said, very binary, right? If Dern wins, it's going to be because this fight in some type of way, whether it is her, getting a takedown, whether it is, Rodriguez slipping on the mat, whether it is her getting on top in any type of way, and getting a submission, I think she finds the optimal lineup at 8,200. On the flip side, if Rodriguez wins, that means, she's probably stuffing the takedown. She's keeping on the feet. She's piecing apart Dern and probably getting a finish along the way. So, don't know what I'm going to do with my ownership yet for this fight, but I do know I'm going to be pretty high on, especially with 10 fights now, right? I think it's going to be a very important fight to target. We have 5 rounds to work with if it does get there. And like you said, I think either Dern gets the sub, Rodriguez gets the KO probably, and I do see it finding the optimal lineup, especially now with 10 fights. So AJ, what is your fight to target for this card?
Yeah, it was initially Dern versus Rodriguez, but then I sat with it more. I thought about it a lot more extensively, and I came to the conclusion that Garcia versus Ontiveros is my selection. 9,100 for Garcia, Ontiveros 7,100. There's a quote-unquote theory out there that there is a lot of reason to target the first fight of the night on a UFC card because it's the least owned, and it makes sense just kind of psychologically, right? People don't want to target the earlier fights. They just want to have fighters that are later on in the card because they would rather be chasing first place rather than like being chased. But theoretically, you could have fighters on the earlier portion of the card and on the later within the same lineup. It just depends on, you know, where the chips fall and all the other fights and that sort of thing. One of the fights least likely to go the distance, when I watch both of them fight, they've got so many clear holes in their game defensively, but offensively, I'd say they're both rather dangerous. My preferred option is Garcia, but I'm not completely writing off Ontiveros. He's a very long, rangy guy, dangerous on the feet, karate background. I think he could threaten Garcia. So it's a fight that I want to be much heavier on than the field. I think that Garcia will be low owned because he is priced near Hawes and Romanov. That will get a lot more traffic. And Ontiveros had also a dusty game log in his UFC fight debut too. So people tend to go underweight on the reference points that we have, and that's what makes this fight that much more intriguing for me in GPPs.
Yep, I love that call, AJ. And like you said, the early first fight of the night seems to always deliver. I don't know what it is, but it seems like there's always a finish. You know very well that when you see Chris Tione out there reffing, it's going to be a very fun fight and typically end with a finish, and that's what it's looked like as of late. And yeah, I think it's going to be low owned as well, which I'm going to be pretty high myself. So Tajik, what are you looking at for your favorite fight to target?
I agree with AJ that Garcia Ontiveros fight is a good fight to target. Also because Garcia is sandwiched between Romanov and what's this other guy's name? Phil Hawes. So he's going to be relatively popular. So you want to target somebody who you want to be a little bit contrarian, especially in a 10-fight slate. So and on the Ontiveros side, he is also a viable play because he is making his 155 debut. Last of his 3 wins were all finished by knockout, and he will be severely underlooked at his price. And it's just in general, due to his fight with Holland, it's not a good look. So if you're targeting, I think this fight is great to be targeted. For Garcia, it's the same thing. The KO or stoppage upside is there. At 9,100 is he priced? I think he's a good play. So I will be targeting this fight for sure.
Yep, I like it. I'm with you guys there. You guys mentioned the ownership. I think he's going to be so much lower owned than Romanov. You got to expect that Romanov is going to be probably the highest owned player on the entire slate. So yeah, I like that call quite a bit. All right, so now we will move into the fight to fade. We'll start with Luke. Luke, what is your fight to fade for this week?
Yeah, no hot takes for me here on the smallest slate, but yeah, I'm going Godinez. Hughes has the worst ITD line on the whole slate, only projected to finish 32% of the time. At least in terms of her pro career, Godinez hasn't proven to be much of a finisher, decent boxer. Hughes has secured finishes, been finished a handful of times, but also, in some interesting circumstances to boot. In general, I think that Hughes is a pretty tough girl. Even in that fight against Torres, it was kind of like an eye issue. The corner kind of got in there too, and then the ref kind of picked up on it. So, I do think it's a decent spot for Godinez, but in my opinion, it's probably more so just a volume-based striking affair. Maybe Godinez does land a few takedowns, but I just feel like there's so many other fights on this slate that do have finishing upside, where this one probably more so falls into the category of your traditional WMMA striking-based decision. So this one's a fight for to me to fade.
Solid. AJ, what are you looking at for a fight to fade?
Yeah, I'm right there with Luke. The Godinez and Hughes fights. I think that, Godinez probably wins. The odds suggest that as well. I think she's a better boxer, but at 8,600, we'd probably need a knockout. She comes from a wrestling background, but her main game plan is to strike, and she just doesn't have like the volume of like a Max Holloway or somebody that could just really, boost that threshold or break through that threshold, rather, where the DraftKings scoring system hasn't been so kind to these, volume-based strikers. So, and on the side of Hughes, there's just other underdogs with better win equity and better chance of putting up a big score in win scenarios. So it's an easy stay away for me on both sides.
I like it. Tajik, what is your fight to fade for this week?
Probably going to be Damon Jackson versus Charles Rosa. They're priced out there in the mid range, so it's very hard to target either of them. They have atrocious accuracy, low volume. I think they will suppress. They will cancel each other. And although people think that it's probably going to play on the ground, I disagree with that. I think they will. Maybe Damon Jackson will try to take him down, but he's not a willing wrestler. And what's going to happen is that it will largely play out standing, and it's going to go to some sloppy decision. Like either way, I think Rosa wins. I don't understand the odds shift here. So for DraftKings purposes, I'm not looking to target either of them much. And I think it's just in general, it's going to be a very, very boring fight.
So you think it's going to play out like the Rosa Aguilar fight, right, where they kind of just pitter patter for 3 rounds?
Yes, and also like you look at Damon Jackson, like how much strikes he throws, right? He throws maybe 2-3 strikes, lands half a strike. And it's just for Rosa. Rosa is actually a good stand-up guy. Like a lot of people underestimate his stand-up. He's okay. There is a reason Miner wanted to take him down. It's his weak spot. We saw it already. And there is somewhat an assumption after his last fight that he's very takedown prone. It's partially right, but not entirely. So, and I don't think Damon Jackson is going to be is going to be there, playing Merab Dvalishvili and then just dragging Charles Rosa across the floor. There's nothing on the paper that warrants Damon Jackson severely overpowering, out grappling, and out wrestling Charles Rosa. And if there is, let me know. But I just don't see it. And I, for that purposes, for that reason, I'm thinking it stays on the ground. It stays standing. They throw a few strikes and it goes to a decision. I favor Rosa if I were to target him in my DraftKings lineups, and Damon Jackson, in my opinion, is overpriced.
Sounds good for sure. Yeah, for me, my fade was actually Staropoli Pickett, but I went with the other one. And like you guys said, Lupita Godinez, Sam Hughes, don't see myself hitting there that much in general. If anything, maybe some Loopy because, like Luke said, maybe a takedown here or there, but I don't think she's going to really need to get those. I think she's just going to kind of pick apart Sam Hughes for 3 rounds. Don't see a finish. She has no knockout wins on her record, and Sam Hughes is very tough. So that's going to be the one for me. Getting into our fighter to fade, Luke, what is your fighter to fade for this week?
Yeah, it pains me to say it because I love the dude, but I'm going with El Guapo, Chris Gutiérrez at 8.9K. Out of the top range, he has the worst ITD line at sub 30%. Obviously, the concern there in terms of if you were to fade Gutiérrez, I think he's got that really nasty kicking game. We saw him finish Vince Morales. We've seen him get off on it before. We know how debilitating of a weapon that can be. So, that always kind of has to be in the back of your mind. If you are to face if you are to fade, I should say, a Chris Gutiérrez, but in general, from his general style, he's kind of a higher volume point fighter, hasn't shown a ton of offensive wrestling upside. The only time he did score over 100 points on DraftKings was in that fight against Vince Morales that he finished via calf kicks. So at 8.9K, I just think there's a lot more viable options in that upper range, especially with that top tier being on Romanov at 9.2. The traditional upper range, is a little bit smaller here. So there's a lot more options I'd rather look to target on this slate, as I don't think the finishing upside for Gutiérrez is overtly high. I more so just see him winning a striking based decision and probably isn't going to 10x in that either. So at 8.9, I'm not really paying or trying to look to pay up from, coupled with Colares proving to be incredibly durable. I mean, we even saw it in the Montel Jackson fight. That might have been one of the most one-sided, 15-minute fights we've ever seen. And he hung tough, man. The guy's got no quit in him at all. Is a black belt in jiu-jitsu to boot. Has shown some defensive responsibility on the ground. So I think a Chris Gutiérrez finish is reasonably lower percentage, but it's also a fight I think he still wins at a decent clip. So at 8.9, he's my fade.
Yeah, I went with him for my fade as well. I don't feel like really great about it. I'm probably not going to completely fade the guy because I could see a situation where he does land a ton of strikes. Maybe he does get a ton of knockdowns. That's the only thing. But if this does go to decision, which I do think it will, because of how tough Colares is, he's not going to go for takedowns. He's not going to get control time. He's going to want to avoid that, keep it on the feet, use those leg kicks, and probably outpoint him to a decision. But again, the only thing that concerns me is if he does knock him down 2 or 3 times, then that'll start to add up. But outside of that, I think he's a pretty solid fade there, right? You have Phil Hawes $100 more, you have Garcia $200 more, and then Romanov $300 more. So I do like all three of those guys more than Gutiérrez. But yeah, I'm not going to completely fade the guy, but in terms of picking a fade, it is going to be Gutiérrez. My original fade was going to be Staropoli, but he is now off the card, so I had to go to a different one there. So Gutiérrez for me as well, just like you, Luke. And then AJ, what are you looking at for a fade here?
Yeah, I don't mean to be boring, but I got to go with Gutierrez as well at 8,900, somebody outside of Godinez. And yeah, you look at, my one fear with fading him is that he obviously should beat the crap out of Colares while this fight is standing. Colares absorbs strikes, defends them rather, 38% is a striking defense, 4.22 absorbed per minute. Gutierrez could, finish him theoretically, but he's historically not a big power puncher. He's mainly been a decision fighter in the UFC. And as you guys mentioned, Colares has been able to survive against some guys that are more dangerous, like against Damon Jackson, for instance. And theoretically, Colares could kind of nullify, Gutierrez's threats at range by getting the body lock, maybe even taking the fight to the ground, and just that iron durability that he has. So it's definitely one that makes me a bit nervous, but kind of to your guys' point, there's just simply better options in that range on the slate and even priced cheaper that I feel most comfortable being underweight to Gutierrez if I had to pick somebody outside of Godinez.
Yep, I agree there. And then Tajik, who are you fading for this week?
So from the bottom range, I think it's actually going to be Felipe Colares. He's a liability standing up. There's not much that he offers on the ground as well. Guti has over 70%, I think 73% takedown defense. So Gutierrez is gonna win this fight anywhere he wants, and I think actually it's problematic because he can keep punching him. Where you can see a couple of calf kicks landing and Colares collapsing, and a couple of knockdowns. Fight Metric has Guti on the lineup, trying to hit the optimal. It's going to be tough, right? So Guti is going to be a good contrarian play, and Colares is going to be a fade because of the amount of punches that he takes, and I think his problem in the slate is exactly the fact that he's a fighter, right? He doesn't like to give up. He doesn't like to quit. He takes punches and just defends it with his head, with his eyebrows. So I would fade him. There's no value in him. So in the 7,300, I know it's not the best, AJ and Luke already, fade somebody at the higher range. So I would want to fade somebody from the underdog side, and it's going to be Felipe Colares.
Sounds good. Yeah, no problem with that. I think Gutierrez does get it done, probably very convincingly as well. So next, we will move on to our favorite dog. We'll start with Luke. Luke, what is your favorite dog for this week?
I'm going Jaron Gooden at 7.4K. I think off the top, he's obviously a pretty boomer bust type of fighter, but he does have one of the better inside the distance lines on the slate. And just of any other dog on the slate, he has the best ITD line at 25% implied and the sixth best round one prop of anybody on the entire slate too. So, he's shown power components, 77% finishing rate. Brown only defense strikes at 53%. He's been knocked out in his last two losses. So from a general analysis perspective, I think Gooden probably is going to struggle to win general minutes in this fight, but I do think opportunities for him to land big shots are going to be there against Brown when he decides to come in. As his range management at times tends to be a tad bit shaky, and Gooden is going to let it fly on the feet. So at 7.4, like I said, it's a bit boomer bust, but I think his upside for the price tag in a W definitely justifies rostering him at a decent clip with some of the durability issues with Brown.
Yep, there aren't a ton of dogs that stick out this week, but I think Gooden is definitely one of them. What is up, Big Show? Good evening, boys. Good evening to you, Big Show. Bunkoots hanging out as well. Preston loving the card as always. There we go. AJ, what are you looking at in terms of your favorite dog of the week?
Yeah, it's going to be Marina Rodriguez for me. One of the better underdogs in terms of win equity. Some potential finishing upside. I think she's got a clear striking advantage over Dern. And I do think that there's some chance that we just see this fight play out for, 25 minutes on the feet. This is the main event, so 5 rounds. And in that fight, I like Rodriguez's chances Just a much better striker than Dern. She's only 8K, so it's not like her last matchup with Waterson where, we need to be cautious of the fact that she's expensive, maybe doesn't hit her salary. If she scores 85 points again for 88K, maybe it's not on the winning lineup, but on a 10-fight slate, it might be enough. And I just like her chances to win in that sort of fight. Dern only has a takedown accuracy of 10%. There's some credence to the fact that Dern is improving. I would just like to see a little bit more consistency out of her wrestling game. She's only landed 2 takedowns in the UFC thus far. Marina, when we have seen her stuck on her back, she's struggled. However, it's just a battle of whether or not Dern could do it. So I'm willing to take my chances on Rodriguez as an underdog. There's an argument to be made that she could even be favored here. She's more proven. She's a better striker in a fight that could easily take place on the feet. So at 8K, I really like Marina Rodriguez here as my underdog play.
So we have Gooden, we have Rodriguez, Tajik. You going with those two, or are you going with somebody else?
And we have Team Elliott, our boy, Team Elliott, the grappling king, right? You would naturally want to target Team Elliott at 7,700, and why not? For the large GPP plays, it could be competitive with versus Matheus Nicolau. Tough fight for him to win, but in general, his grappling prowess is there, and he can be on a full display against Nicolau. He would have to be cautious not to get submitted by Nicolau, but in general, at 7,700, there's so few underdogs that you can target on the slate, which makes it very, very difficult. So I would say Team Elliott, high ceiling that he has at 7,700 is somebody that you may probably want to have in the main GPP slate.
Yep, I agree. I don't necessarily think he wins, but if he does win, it's going to be a lot of takedowns, a lot of strikes, a lot of control time as well. So yeah, definitely somebody to keep in the player pool. For me, I'm going to agree with AJ here. I'm going to go with Marina Rodriguez, and pretty much for all the points he brought up, if Dern's not able to get a takedown here, Rodriguez is going to score very well. She's not going to go for takedowns or nothing like that, or at least I hope not, but she's going to get a lot of strikes, potentially find a finish at some point. Dern, like I said, 10% takedown accuracy. I think it's only going to take one, to be honest, for her to finish the fight. But again, if that does not come, we're getting Rodriguez at 8K. We have 25 minutes to work with, tons of strikes to work with, and there's not much value on the slate. There's not many dogs I like. So Rodriguez at 8K was somebody that stuck out in terms of one of my favorite dogs there. But yeah, I like all three of the ones we talked about, Gooden, Rodriguez, and Elliott. I think they're all three that we could have in our player pools this week. So we will now move on to a favorite GPP play for GPP. We're looking for high upside, high ceiling, a fighter that you think could potentially win a tournament. And let's start with Luke.
Yeah, I'm going Romanov right at the top at 9.2, best ITD line on the slate, roughly 70% implied, and the best round one prop on the slate at roughly 45% implied, obviously minus 600 on the money line. So, in comparison to potentially larger slate, you're having to pay up maybe 9.4, 9.5, 9.6, but at 9.2 on this type of slate, obviously he's going to be really high owned. So, do what you will there with exposure, but I think he's a pretty bad style matchup for Vanderaa. 82% of Romanov fights are spent grappling. And when we have seen Vanderaa on bottom, it just hasn't looked particularly encouraging. He is a black belt in jiu-jitsu, but just hasn't really shown a ton of overt submission upside or what to really do from his back. We saw Spivak pretty much take him down with ease, control him, pound him out. Spivak's obviously shown some of those other components in other fights, but I still don't think he's like a great wrestler per se. So I don't really see why Romanov can't toss around Vanderaa, potentially get him out of there earlier too. So, and just with the general win equity of Vanderaa being more so KO or bust, we saw him look decent in his last fight against Tafa. Don't think many people expected him to go out there and necessarily out kickbox just in Tafa, but he did. But my point, once again, going back to the 82% of time spent in Romanov fights are in the grappling, I just think that window for Vanderaa is going to be extremely low. So at 9.2, I feel like it's one of those spots where you kind of almost have to have him, though, even though he's going to be higher owned. He's just kind of like a free square to me.
Yeah, that's what it seems like for me as well. The guy that I picked is going to be Steve Garcia, 9100. We talked about him a little bit earlier. We talked about how he's going to be, first of all, a lot lower owned than a Romanov. He's going to be lower owned than a Hawes. And actually, kind of like some of the things this guy does in his game. He comes forward, he throws with bad intentions. Great combinations, uses elbows, knees, and Ontiveros. I don't think he's the most durable guy at all. I think this guy is pretty much made out of glass. He's been finished 7 times in his entire career, and a lot of those are like fights where he's like quitting in the fight. I remember watching a fight where he went up to the ref and said, "I'm done" during the fight. He got taken down, and same thing. He said he's done, and I just don't think he's mentally tough. And I think Garcia is going to hit him very, very hard. And with that said, I think Ontiveros himself could be live for an early finish. He looks to be a solid hammer, but he looks to be an awful nail as well. I think Garcia is very live for not only a finish, but probably a very early finish also. So I do like Garcia 9100. I'm really hoping he's going to be low owned because he's going to be one of my probably highest owned fighters on the entire slate, up there with a Romanov. So I like Steve Garcia 9100. AJ, who are you looking at for a GPP play this week?
I like that Tajik brought up Tim Elliott because I think that's just a really good fight to target. Tim Elliott usually encourages a very high pace in his fights. And when we have seen him lose, it's because he gets, submitted. Like he's just not, while he's offensively capable in terms of like his guard passing and wrestling and scrambling and stuff like that, defensively, he leaves a lot of openings, submitted by Ben Winn, submitted by Brandon Royval, and Matheus Nicolau is a legit submission grappler, a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I think if this fight goes to the ground, he's a legit threat to submit Elliott. If it, for whatever reason, plays out on the feet, that would be how this, could look like a bad take, because unless if Nicolau, knocks Elliott out, he is a rather low output striker. So don't necessarily think he'd put up a big score in that scenario, though possible, because Elliott does leave openings defensively on the feet. We have seen him get hurt in the past, like against Askarov, where he was almost out on his feet. So I see the potential there with him, but more so, if I'm playing Nicolau, it's because I think this fight will take place on the ground, and usually Tim Elliott fights do, and usually there's opportunities where the opposition puts him in a bad spot, like even against Ryan Benoit, was in a leg lock there, almost got submitted, didn't really face much resistance against Jordan Espinoza last time out, but against a guy like Nicolau, I think that there will be some more scrambles here, some more opportunities to finish, and like both sides of that fight, but I do prefer the side of Nicolau.
Yeah, good point. And Tim Elliott fights do tend to score pretty well, win or lose. Buff is saying that Elliott leaves his neck hanging for the guillotine. Yeah, Elliott's been submitted like 5 times in his career. So yeah, I don't hate that take whatsoever. We see that Elliott is sitting at 7,700 and Nicolau 8,500. 10-fight slate. I could definitely see it finding the optimal lineup. Tajik, what are you looking at for in terms of a GPP play?
In terms of GPP, I'm probably going to say something a little bit controversial, but so what? There is a slight chance that that Alexander Romanov is actually not going to make it to the optimal. And so I know he will be heavily targeted. He's probably going to be close to 80% owned, and everybody's going to want him. And why not, right? He's 9,200. He beat everybody. He scored 100 points multiple times. I think for me, I would look in GPP. I would look at Sabina Mazo at 8,300. I think she has a volume. She can put it up. She can take it to the decision. Yes, it's most likely to go to a decision, but a late finish would also give her a decent amount of points. And if you're targeting larger GPP, you do want to be contrarian, right? Especially on a 10-fight slate. So everybody and their relatives are going to go to Romanov, which is natural. So when you go Romanov, I'm probably going to be very, very light on Romanov. I don't discourage to play Romanov just in general, because there's a significant chance he will make it to the optimal. But like I said, not in the definitive terms. I think he might miss the optimal. And so Sabina Mazo, in that sense, for me, is a perfect play. She's underlooked. She doesn't have a high probability to finish like the other guys on the slate. So yeah, here you go.
Nice. Kind of a hot take, but not really, right? I think that fight could be very interesting on a 10-fight slate. That might be one of the lowest owned fights as a whole, right? And Agapova, Mazo, I could see it scoring well. We saw Shanna Dobson score nearly 100 points against her, right? So why can't Mazo? So yeah, don't hate that call. Adam saying Pickett is my dog this week. Not much to work with, but sadly, Adam, the Pickett fight is off. Pickett is out. I think they're looking for another opponent for Staropoli. Is that right? Or am I the other way around?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
Okay.
Staropoli could potentially be on the card, but no definitive statement yet.
Okay, sounds good. So yeah, no Pickett this week, sadly. So we will move on to our favorite cash play. For cash, we are looking for a nice floor, someone who is safe. I'll kind of start it off here. For me, I'm going to go with Alexander Romanov. I think he's probably a must-own in cash. I see him being up in that 80%, 90% range. We saw that Spivak was able to take down Jared Vanderaa very easily multiple times, and Vanderaa did not really offer it much of, if anything, off his back, considering he is a black belt. But it really didn't look like it. Spivak was able to make quick work of them. I expect, I expect Romanov. There we go. I expect Romanov to get him out of there, take him down multiple times, and probably just finish him, maybe in the first or second round. So I think he's pretty safe. It is a heavyweight fight, so it can't be that safe. But as long as Romanov does finish him within the first round and a half, I think he'll be all right. If the fight does get extended, say to the third round, then I have some concerns. But hard to see Vanderaa lasting that long. So for me, I'm going to go with Romanov for my favorite cash play. Luke, what are you looking at for a cash play here?
Yeah, I think Romanov's kind of interchangeable between GPPs and cash for me, but I'm actually going to say Phil Hawes at 9K. Traditionally, you won't hear me say like Hawes associated with cash traditionally, but in terms of this particular style matchup, on paper, it's wrestler versus wrestler. Hawes is the bigger guy. He's the better striker, has much more finishing upside. And I wouldn't recommend him if it wasn't for the last fight, at least in terms of his general gas, because we have seen that be somewhat questionable, but it looked like it did hold up fine in his last outing as well. So, I'm definitely playing into that a little bit, and coupled with the fact that wins inside the distance line is only plus 475. And for a W for him, it more so looks something like potentially banking on Hawes's gas because, he's wrestling him in that scenario. So because of that, I just think there's some more general safety in Phil Hawes than you'll see traditionally in past Phil Hawes fights here with him. And he is still projected to win this fight, at a reasonably sizable clip. I do think he's the better wrestler. I do think he's the better striker. I do think he has more finishing upside in this fight and even early too. So I actually think Phil Hawes is a decent cash look this week.
Yeah, we haven't talked about Hawes much, but I'm with you. I think he does win this fight more often than not. And yeah, Phil Hawes apparently has a gas tank now, and that is a very, very scary thing. So yeah, I'm with you there. I do like Hawes. I'll have a ton of them this week. AJ, what is your favorite cash play for this week?
Yeah, I like both of those recommendations. Ultimately, I selected Romanov. I like Tajik's, stance on being underweight to him in GPPs. I think that makes a ton of sense. Because there's still a chance that he comes through, puts up a big score, but he doesn't end up optimal. For cash games, though, he's quote unquote safe. He's got strong odds to win inside the distance. He's a grappler facing a guy who's looked dreadful on his back, to put it bluntly. Taken down 3 times on 3 attempts by Spivak. Romanov's more physical than Spivak, not the most technical guy. But this is a matchup I think he should roll here. All of his wins are by finish. Well, I take that back. All of his wins, except for his last fight against Juan Espino, are by finish. So he shouldn't face near the resistance here that he faced against Espino. I think Espino is one of the tougher matchups he could face in the division. But against a guy who historically struggles to defend takedowns, scramble from his back, this should be I don't want to say a layup spot because it is a heavyweight fight at the end of the day, but a really, really good style matchup for Romanov. And we have seen that he could take a big shot. And Vanderaa, even though he's a striker, doesn't seem like he has the most like one hitter quitter type power for heavyweight standards. So I like Romanov's chances of avoiding that, quote unquote fluke KO shot in this matchup as well.
Yep, I like it. So we have Romanov, we have Hawes, Tajik. What do you have for your favorite cash play?
Probably Chris Gutiérrez. I like him. It's an easy matchup for him to showcase his skill. There's very little risk in losing this fight, and there's a good upside potential. So I just to keep it simple, I think he runs through Felipe Colares, and he's a very safe play. And at his salary, I think it's a good play, good cash play as well.
Yeah, I think it's safe as well. So we will move on. Before we do so, if you all can hit the like in the chat, that'd be much, much appreciated. Subscribe here to Pub Sports. We'll be back next week on Tuesday, 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern time, as always. And now we're going to go to our favorite value play. And yeah, there's not a ton that sticks out this week at all in terms of value. But Luke, what did you find for this value play spot?
Yeah, I'm actually going with Mackenzie Dern at 8.2K. I think you guys brought up a lot of great reasons for Rodriguez being a great value play because you can 100% make the case she is. I think kind of they're both interchangeable in that respect. But from a DraftKings perspective, and at least in terms of what her base is, and we know how well grapplers score, and what just given what we've seen from Rodriguez on bottom, despite that takedown accuracy number with Rodriguez, when she gets taken down, she doesn't get up. She's been 10-8'd twice. Her guard retention's gotten a little bit better, but for Mackenzie Dern to win this fight and maximize her value, I mean, her upside, in my opinion, just exponentially exceeds 8.2K. She's all the way up to -170 to just win the fight in general. Third best ITD line on the card and the fourth best round one prop on the card at roughly 25%. So in theory, if Dern is able to do what she needs to do to win this fight, that theoretically limits obviously the best path of Rodriguez, which is, obviously piecing her up on the feet, if not finishing her too. So I think at 8.2K, once again, I think you can easily chuck Rodriguez in here, ironically too, as a great value play. I think based on how the fight plays, either girl is going to exceed their price tag, most likely find their way to the optimal lineup. But at 8.2 for Dern, when she's reliable to grapple, and I think just one takedown is obviously around, and she's one of the few girls, even though that Rodriguez has fought some good submission-based grapplers in the past, Dern has the game to, kind of make her pay to not be able to get up after 4 or so minutes in terms of being able to find a finish. So at 8.2K, I think Dern is a solid value play.
Yep, one takedown is probably all she needs to get that sub there. The main event as a whole is something I'm going to be very heavily targeted there. AJ, what are you looking at in terms of a value play?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Sabina Mazo at 8,300. Historically, she scores pretty well and wins, and I'm probably biased here because I was on her against Shannon Dodson, and that was kind of when the secret wasn't out on her. But yeah, good volume. I think even though she's not necessarily reliable to land takedowns, I think she could if she wants. Agapova is a pretty atrocious takedown defender. Going back on tape, Dobson took her down with ease twice. Obviously, she was back mounted. And I just trust Mazo much more in an extended fight. Perhaps there's some credence to, like Tajik pointed out earlier, maybe a late finish from Mazo because Agapova hasn't addressed her cardio. I think Mazo's a better technical striker. Better submission grappler, and she should be able to win this fight, I think, wherever it goes. Little concerned about her getting stuck on her back, but I don't think Agapova has near the control that, say, Alexis Davis did. So I think that at 8,300 and a 10-fight slate where this fight won't be heavily targeted, she's very interesting to me.
Yep, don't hate that. For me, I'm going to go with Jared Gooden. I think Luke talked about him a little bit earlier, but yeah, I think if Gooden does win, it's going to be by knockout. I don't really see him winning a decision going against Randy Brown, who has been finished a few times. I think he's been knocked out twice, once by Nico Price and then once by Vicente Luque. In terms of, Gooden's game, there's some things I don't like in terms of him being very hittable. Does absorb 7.5 significant strikes per minute, only giving out 5.04. But, he is very high volume. He seems very durable. I think he's only been knocked out one time in his 6 losses, so that's good. And again, I think if there is a finish in this fight, I'm kind of more leaning towards it being on the Gooden side with how durable that Gooden does look. So 7,400, I'll take the upside there. Don't hate it going against Brown. And plus, I do think the line should be a little bit closer. It seems a little bit too wide for me. So Gooden for me, 7,400. Tajik, what are you looking at in terms of a value play there?
The best value play for me is going to be Deron Winn. His fight against Phil Hawes, in my opinion, will be very competitive. I think his wrestling is on par with Phil Hawes. Phil Hawes will be very popular at 9,000. I'm looking forward to that. I think Deron can make it competitive with clinching, potentially also offering a takedowns, and his stand-up is actually pretty okay. So I think there is a chance that he beats Phil Hawes. I actually believe my personal prediction is that he will beat Phil Hawes in this matchup, and he will make it in the optimal. So for me, he is the best value play for the slate.
Yeah, I actually had a Deron Winn in my value play originally, switching out to Gooden last second. So yeah, we'll move on to our dart throw of the week, and we'll start with Luke. Luke, what is your dart throw?
Yeah, this is going to be a pretty big one, but I'm actually going to Damon Jackson at 8.4K. Historically, Rose has been a pretty difficult guy to finish, but, historically also Jackson's been a pretty potent finisher and only has the 7th best ITD line on the entire slate. Even in his last fight with Janes, he wasn't really reacting to shots. particularly well. I know Jackson isn't the biggest striker, but I actually do think he is the better wrestler in this matchup, and I think he can put Charles Rosa in some tricky spots here. Even Jackson, the first guy to submit Mirsad Bektic in, I think, like 17 pro fights, who's probably one of the better wrestlers, at least in terms of base stats, that we've actually seen in the 145-pound division. So I think that needs to be noted. I guess I slightly disagree with Tajik. I actually think it's a pretty decent spot for Damon Jackson. The guys that he's getting dinged by are pretty explosive, big strikers, where Rosa kind of just more plays the technical pitter-patter based game. And I just think Jackson has actually a really decent style to beat Charles Rosa. Does he finish him necessarily? I'm not sure. We've seen Rosa put in some tricky spots and he's been able to survive, but I do think Jackson actually is one of the better pure submission-based grapplers who actually comes from an All-American wrestling background to boot. So I like Damon Jackson at 8.4. I think he's going to be a bit lower owned. I think the fight in general is not going to be targeted very heavily. And I do think Jackson could be actually sneaky live for a finish. If not, he's probably just going to win on a lot of takedowns, a lot of control. So I think he can actually exceed value at 8.4, even in a decision.
So Damon Jackson, 8,400. For me, I'm going to be kind of weird here. Charlie Ontiveros, who is 7,100. I just think this is going to be a fight to target. I think it's going to be one of those fights where they just kind of stand in the middle and bang until one man falls. And Ontiveros, if he does win, typically it is by finish, and it is early, especially as some of his late finishes have been early in that first round. He's dangerous. He's long. He's rangy. He's going to have the height and reach advantage. Maybe he could finish Garcia in the first round. If he does, I see really nobody playing him at all. So 7,100, kind of a dart throw. I do, fully expect him to get knocked out here, but the fight as a whole is something I do like quite a bit, and I'll take the shot at Ontiveros in terms of a dart throw there. AJ, what are you looking at in terms of a dart throw?
Yeah, for me, it's Jared Gooden here at 7,400. I think this is a spot he could potentially win. I mean, you look at, he's a guy that likes to throw leg kicks. Brown struggles with leg kicks. He's got some power in his hands, as we learned his last fight. And Brown is susceptible to getting hurt. And again, it's pretty much just like a knockout or bust, I guess, for Gooden to, put up a big score. But theoretically, even if he wins like a damage-based decision, I think he could put up score finally, even in that scenario too. So I still don't think a lot of people will play him just because there's just more options. He's somewhat of a big underdog, even if you maybe don't want to agree with the betting line. But I like his chances, honestly, in a fight that probably should be contested on the feet. So Jared Gooden at 7,400 would be my preferred option down there.
Gooden 7,400. Yep, I think if he does win it, it probably is by a KO. But like you mentioned, even if it is a decision, I think 7,400 on a 10-fight slate, that could very well do it. In terms of finding the optimal Tajik, what are you looking at for a dart throw here?
A dart throw, I think, because of what's this guy's name that you just mentioned that fighting Brown?
Gooden.
Gooden, yes. Because a lot of people will go at that range for Jared Gooden. I think it's viable to consider Sam Hughes as a dart throw. Only because at 7,600, I think she should offer Lupita a competitive fight. Lupita is severely overpriced. They know each other. They fought already. Sam Hughes has a reach and height advantage on her. Plus, like I said, they know each other very well. She will not be popular at all. That fight will be faded. So you have to think in the contrarian ways, and with everybody going on Gooden and some other fighters in that range, like Team Elliott. Think about it. Team Elliott is 7,700. Sam Hughes at 7,600. If you're trying to take it down, actually is a pretty decent dart throw. She's not. I don't think she has a great chance to win this fight. I think it will be a close fight, but the odds are nowhere near reality, and I think she's actually a decent dart throw at 7,600.
Yeah, I think she'll be one of the less popular plays on the entire slate. So if she does win, I think we're going to gain a big advantage on the field if she does put up a decent score. We have Uncle Weezy checking in. He said, "What's up, fellas? Thanks for filling in for me, Tajik Bey." Give a shout out to Tajik. Robert saying Tajik in the house. There we go. Connor Mack in the building as well, saying hit the like button. I agree. Hit the like button. Let's go. So if anybody in the chat has any questions, put them out now. We'll answer them towards the end. So we'll get to those in a little bit. So put questions in the comments there. But right now, we're going to see who won the contest last week. So let's start with last place. So last place, Uncle Weezy with Smith, Holland, Selecki, Price, Perillo, and Perez, scoring 240.74 DraftKings points. Third place is Luke's with Walker, Serkinov, Gordon, Price, Rosa, Hernandez, scoring 420.19 DraftKings points. And second place, me with Walker, Serkinov, Malarkey, Price, Rosa, and Hernandez, scoring 454.99 points. And in first place, congrats, AJ, Santos, Malarkey, O'Neill, Price, Betch Correa, Hernandez, scoring 503.28 DraftKings points. AJ, how does it feel to get your first win on here?
Feels good. Got to be humble, though, of course. You guys are all sharp. Can't act like I've got this thing in the bag by any means. Got a long way to go. But, yeah, I feel very lucky, honestly. Punting down is something that I like to employ in cash games, and I've done that from time to time. I did that with Kohea just to afford some other options that I feel good about. Tying thing over to this slate, though, I'm actually not going to be employing that strategy as it's a case-by-case basis. But I do feel fortunate that it worked out for me this past time.
Yeah, definitely worked. I was actually keeping up with it during the fights, and I had Walker, you had Santos. Santos got the job done, but yeah, that was a very, very good job by you. Way to get first place there. So getting into this week, let's get to our lineups here. We'll start with Luke. Tajik, if you have a lineup, that's fine. If you don't, maybe you can message me one. We'll see how you do. But Uncle Weezy also provided a lineup as well. So Luke, what do you have for this week?
I'm going Romanov, Nicolau, Jackson, Mazo, Dern, and Gooden.
Sounds good. Luke, AJ, what are you looking at for this week for your lineup?
So I'm going to go with Hawes, Garcia, Romanov, Gooden, Rodriguez, excuse me, and Colares.
AJ, we have the same exact lineup, so one of us is going to have to change. We'll get back to it, but one of us is going to have to change. But yeah, I had the same exact lineup as you, AJ. I had Romanov, Garcia, Hawes, Rodriguez, Colares, Gooden. That's what you have, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, well, we'll talk about it. We'll figure it out before the fights come. Tajik, do you have a lineup, or do you want to DM me one later in the week?
No, I don't have a lineup just yet. Just maybe a couple of hot takes that we talked about. I think there is a chance Romanov will miss the optimal lineup. I'm big on Deron Winn this week as well, and don't sleep on Lupita versus Sam Hughes. But when I'll make the lineup, I'll probably share it. I actually feel good about this week's slate, and last week I didn't, even though I made some good predictions. But I think this slate is going to be good for GPP and for betting purposes.
Oh, yeah. When Tajik has a hot take, people need to listen, because he was the only person last week that said the main event was going to decision. Everybody called him crazy, including me. And whenever it went to decision, I was thinking about Tajik. There's a good call there. For Weezy went with Romanov, Garcia, Gutiérrez, Rodriguez, Elliott, and Gooden. So those are the lineups for this week. Me and AJ about to figure out who's going to change, and then we'll figure that out before the fights start there and see who wins for this week. So let's get into our predictions. I'll start here. I'm going to go with Mackenzie Dern. I'm going to go with Randy Brown, Matheus Nicolau, Mariya Agapova. Don't feel great about that. Deron Winn, Chris Gutiérrez, Alexander Romanov, Damon Jackson, Lupita Godinez, and then Steve Garcia. As far as Luke, what are you looking at for your picks here?
Yep, I'm going contrary to actually my lineups. So I'm going to get a little more so betting-based value. I'm going Rodriguez, Gooden, Nicolau, Agapova, Hawes, Gutiérrez, Romanov, Jackson, Godinez, and Garcia.
Sounds good. Luke, AJ, what are you looking at for your picks for this week?
Going to go with Rodriguez, Brown, Nicolau, Mazo, Hawes, Gutiérrez, Romanov, Rosa, Godinez, and Garcia.
And Tajik, how about you?
I'm gonna go with Rodriguez, Brown, Nicolau, Mazo, Deron Winn, Chris Gutiérrez, Romanov, Charles Rosa, Steve Garcia, and Lupita and Sam. So close. Oh, I'm gonna go with Sam Hughes by decision, and that's probably it.
Sounds good. So let's get to some questions here. So Luke, he's saying, if Deron wins, what do you see happening by decision or finish?
Decision for excuse me, decision for me, most likely. I think Winn just needs to make it a greasy, gritty, grindy type of fight. Hopefully sap that gas tank of Phil Hawes and kind of edge a decision that way. Maybe his hands will be able to open up in the scenario that Hawes does slow down. But if he does win, I don't really see it being decisive. I more so see it, kind of squeaking a split. But if he can kind of push that pace and pressure, that is the path for Winn here.
All right. AJ, any parlays you like? Any parlay pieces sticking out?
Ooh. Honestly, I'm not the biggest parlay guy. The only time I really do parlays is when DraftKings offers that same game parlay for NFL. So I'm not exactly the right guy to ask, but maybe Tajik or Luke could advise on that.
Tajik, any parlay pieces sticking out this week?
Oh, parlay pieces, huh? Okay. Marina Rodriguez by finish, and then take Matheus Nicolau by submission.
That's a juicy parlay. Okay, I like that, Tajik. All right, so I think that is about it. We'll head out of here. Be sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe, guys. Luke, let them know where they could find you and what you have going on throughout the week.
Yep, guys, we got Contender Series coming up in about 10 minutes or so. I'm doing bets and content over at dailyfanmma.com. If you guys are looking for another opinion, some in detail, check them out over there at dailyfanmma.com for Contender Series. Patreon.com/SWR betting for my UFC bets, content, all that fun stuff over there. Having a pretty solid year. Twitter, SWR_betting, Club and Sub podcast every Wednesday night at 9 Eastern with the boys, breaking down these cards as well. So those are my plugs.
That was good. AJ, let them know where they can find you, what you have going on throughout the week.
Yeah, Twitter at AJMMA Betting. Got some breakdowns posted for this UFC card. Got some future bets for upcoming UFC cards. Cheers, guys. Awesome doing this with you. Good luck on your bets, and let's do this thing.
For sure. And then Tajik, let them know where they can find you. And you going on any new podcasts this week?
I don't know. I would love to be on your shows. I haven't. I'm traveling to Harlem this week, so I'm gonna visit a few of my colleagues and family. But I would love to be on maybe on your show on Saturday. But so far, no. No. But you can find me on Twitter at Tajik Bey. And yes, I would like to make a guest appearances further on. And Brady, Uncle Weezy, and the other guys. I think it's a great opportunity. It's my first broadcast with AJ and Luke. A lot of respect. I watch you guys all the time. You're a part of my research routine. And so, thank you, Brady, for having me. And great to be on this panel with everybody else.
No problem. Thanks for coming on, especially on short notice. So that's been it, guys. We'll see you next week on Tuesday. Leave a like, subscribe on your way out, and good luck for UFC Vegas.